Inshallah, for the gathering that we have, inshallah, today, we're going to be focusing on one of the topics that are very, very critical to the time that we're in right now. Yani, subhanAllah, if you look at anywhere in the Muslim world, wallahi, you will see bloodshed, you will see difficulty, turmoil, hardship, violence, a lot of trouble. And a lot of us are wondering, yani, what is the solution? Where do we begin? How do we fix this? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that the Prophet Muhammad was the perfect example. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ. And we know the ayat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed in the Prophet Muhammad is a perfect example for whoever believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and whoever is striving for the next world. So inshallah, for the time that we have together, we're going to focus on the topic of how the Prophet Muhammad laid the foundation for the spread of the Muslim Ummah, and how he trained the children around him, right? And how he dealt with the children around him. Because it is these same children, these same guys that lived and were brought up in the school of the Prophet Muhammad, the school of knowledge, the school of teaching, the school of etiquette and adab and manners. It's these same guys that took Islam all the way as far as Isfahan, Sindh, Pakistan, India, and as far as Spain, Grenada, all those places. So I want to begin by the beautiful hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that we all know. The Prophet Muhammad says, مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا وَيَعْرِفْ حَقَّ كَبِيرَنَا فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا. Whoever does not know, whoever does not show mercy to the kind, nor knows the respectful position of the old, is not of us. And in this directly we see the balance of the Prophet Muhammad, that beautiful balance and the beautiful equilibrium. Because he gives the beautiful advice to the young, and at the same time he gives the advice to the old. And he shows how the two go together, because showing mercy to the young will in essence allow those people, when they grow older, to respect the elders and allow them as old people to receive the respect they deserve. And you see that beautiful balance and the beautiful equilibrium that the Prophet Muhammad sets. And we know the beautiful hadith, we know many of them, but inshallah, for the session that we have today, we're going to focus on some rare narrations that are all authentic, inshallah, that the Prophet Muhammad is, of course, involved in. Now, Anas ibn Malik narrates most of these narrations. And why? Because Anas ibn Malik, can someone tell me why Anas ibn Malik would narrate most of them? He was with the Prophet Muhammad a lot of the time, because he was one of the servants of the Prophet Muhammad. His mom worked really hard to convince the Prophet Muhammad to get him to stay with the Prophet Muhammad for a very long time. So we'll begin with the first narration. Anas ibn Malik narrates, and listen to this beautiful story. He says, once the Prophet Muhammad was lying down. He was not fully asleep. He was just lying down. And Al-Hasan walks in on the Prophet Muhammad and he gets and crawls on the Prophet Muhammad and starts playing with the Prophet Muhammad. So he removes the cover that's covering the Prophet Muhammad's body, and he basically allows the navel or the belly button of the Prophet Muhammad to show. Now Anas ibn Malik at this point is like, subhanAllah, should I intervene? Should I do something? So he's trying to stay, right? He's trying to stay calm and trying to stay balanced until, Al-Hasan urinates on the Prophet Muhammad's belly button. That's when Anas ibn Malik is like, okay, I gotta intervene here. So he gets up, with the intention of taking Al-Hasan away, and the Prophet Muhammad says, "Da, leave him alone. Let him finish. Let him finish relieving himself, and then we'll deal with it." And the Prophet Muhammad very calmly, he just poured some water on it, purified the clothing, and carried on after he was finished. And then this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful example how wise and patient the Prophet Muhammad was when it came to dealing with children. Now imagine just the level of patience compared to the patience that we have if we are caught in that situation. A lot of us would yell, scream, utter wrong words and whatnot, but the Prophet Muhammad very, very patiently, very wisely, just let him finish and just carried on after purifying his clothing. Anas ibn Malik says that the Prophet Muhammad had a specific slot. Listen to this carefully. The Prophet Muhammad had a specific slot in his schedule that was dedicated towards the children. Every single day, he had a specific day, a specific time allocated, a specific slot for the children and their needs. SubhanAllah. All the new births, he would actually attend, and most of the parents would come to, maybe involve the Prophet Muhammad in naming the children, in carrying the, cultural aspects of, births and whatnot. And one of them is, of course, we know that the people of Ansar really loved dates. They really loved dates. It was a cultural heritage for them to cherish dates. And it was the most cherished food. to the point where they had competitions about naming date species, the historical context behind the dates, where they were raised, what kind of tribe, raised them. And a lot of the history, they would have competitions about that, and this is authentic. But what's really interesting is some of them would bring their babies to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to do, to basically carry the cultural heritage which came before Islam, which is basically to take a date and to put it into the baby's mouth and allow the baby to, taste the sweet. So it was the cultural heritage that they carried. And what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ added, he would actually take this piece of date and he would chew it to the point where it became juicy and soft. And once it became juicy and soft, he would hand it to the baby. And once, Anas ibn Malik, he says, I came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with a guy, his name is Abdullah ibn Talha. And the parents of Abdullah ibn Talha told Anas ibn Malik, take our baby to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and make sure the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would do this and carry it with our baby. And then the baby came forward and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saw him, he greeted him, welcomed him with a smile, and then he chewed it until it was very soft, then put it gently to the baby, and the baby stuck his tongue in and out to indicate that he really liked it. Right? He really liked the taste of the dates. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ smiled and tapped him on the forehead, right? Gently brushed his hair and made dua for him. Little baby hair that babies, as we know, have. And so here we see the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and how involved he was, not just with children when they're older, but even from the beginning, from birth, he would be involved in not just naming them and not carrying over, but many things that we are going to, inshallah, learn together. Now, Anas ibn Malik narrates another one. And inshallah, the next two narrations will be about Anas ibn Malik. And inshallah, we'll move away from Anas ibn Malik to get more, inshallah, narrations. So this narration from Anas ibn Malik, he says, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave me a message, a scroll. And he told me to deliver this message to this person. Okay? And he says, I went and I delivered the message. And then I just got delayed. And I came back very late to find the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ standing in the exact same position where he left me before he told me to go get them to deliver the message. And he says, listen to the hikmah of Anas ibn Malik, the wisdom. He says, this is a message that was not requiring a response, not an immediate response. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not waiting for Anas to come back so he would hear the response. He was merely waiting for Anas ibn Malik to come back so he would make sure that he's safe. He's okay. Imagine waiting, taking the time from his busy schedule to make sure that Anas came back safely. And he says, ever since I tried my best to make sure I get back on time so I don't actually disturb the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because he would be worried about Anas. But at the same time, he would entrust him with the responsibility, so he would give him the ability to feel like he's grown and to give him a very strong base from early on, mashallah. Another beautiful narration, again by Anas ibn Malik. He says, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ entrusted me with a message and told me to deliver it. And I went to deliver this message, but on the way back, right, actually on the way there, right, he got held playing a game, hide and seek, old style of hide and seek. And he says, I got caught into the game and I really enjoyed it. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I feel these hands come right from behind me, covering my eyes. And I hear the voice, who is it? Who is it? Who do you think it is? Who do you think it is? And he says, I knew it was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because the soft texture of his hands. It was a specific soft texture. And he says, because I knew the odor of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It was a distinct odor that was very tight, very beautiful, very blessed. And we know this, many narrations confirmed by his wives, confirmed by many of the children, and we're going to see other narrations later on. He says, I knew it was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but I liked to play along. So I started saying, I don't know, who could it be? Who could it be? Who's behind me? Let me go, let me go. And then he says, I quickly brushed the hands away and turned behind and saw it was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So I saw him smiling at me. And then I remembered that he told me to deliver the message. So then I'm like, oh, okay, inshallah, I'll get to it now. And he walked very gently away from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to deliver the message. But look at how beautiful the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's character was. Imagine if this was you. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Right? This is the beginning of a beating session. Right? I trust you with the most important, it's just one little message. I tell you to go from here to there and you can't get it done properly. La hawla. And then you would deliver a mashallah beautiful speech, right? We know. This is mashallah something very common among the Muslim community. May Allah forgive us and allow us to revive the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Another beautiful narration is by Jabir ibn Thamra. And he says, أوصتني أمي بالذهاب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. He says, my mom advised me to go to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and spend as much time as possible with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Of course, every mother wishes for her child to, mashallah, be raised in a Imagine if it's a sheikh, like a really good sheikh with a lot of knowledge, your mom will be like, go spend time with him. This is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So every mother wished for her daughter or son to spend as much time and learn from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's full and holistic personality. So he says, my mom told me to go to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but I was a very shy guy. So I just went, saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam delivering a little bit of a reminder. Then he prayed. He told Bilal to get up and do the adhan, the iqamah. So then I prayed behind the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I casually just started following him when he finished. Imagine the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is walking, and then Jabir is just following him behind. Right? He says it was the habit of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to never look back. Right? He did not look back. It's one of his sunnahs. So he said he didn't notice I was following him until he met two guys in the street. He met two little kids in the street. And he started playing with them. He started, brushing their hair, brushing their cheeks, and just enjoying the time and smiling with them. Then he felt jealous. He's like, why are they getting this treatment and I'm not? Then he came to him, he was like, I'm a child too. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam began smiling with him. He began to play with his cheek and just playfully play with him as well, showing how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam really was with the youngsters. And it's not just the boys. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ would call Zainab Zuwainab. He would, playfully nickname her. It's like Catherine being called Kate or, whatnot. So he would, playfully nickname them and give them these beautiful names. And Zainab actually narrates one of the most beautiful stories. And this really, really touches me because, many of us, when we're growing up, we have a very similar incident, right? We'll narrate the story and then I'll get you, inshallah, to think about what you would do in that case. So Zainab says, it was, she was a curious little girl. She would enjoy walking around, wandering around, enjoying going places and whatnot. So once she's going around, she comes into the Prophet Muhammad's house. She walks in. She's a little baby girl, right? She's a girl, mashallah. And she walks into the Prophet Muhammad's house and walks into the ghusl area and sees the Prophet Muhammad making ghusl. Now the Prophet Muhammad, what do you think he's going to do in this case? La hawla wa la quwwata, what are you doing? Shame on you. Where's the, right? I remember a similar incident happened where we were visiting an old person's house. And this person had a granddaughter. And she walked in, wallahi, true story. I remember this like 15 years ago. She walked in on him and the words he said to her and the tone of the words, I still remember them till this day. The most vulgar words in the Arab dictionary are stuck in my mind because of this one incident. Wallahi, I remember word by word. And at that time, this guy was eloquent. He was really eloquent. He had a PhD in linguistics, Arabic, and whatnot. So he was really eloquent. And he was an very old person, very grumpy person. So the words he used were very. And I remembered, and I went to my mom, what do these words mean? She's like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Right? Where did you hear this? Right? So it goes to show how we react in these situations. By the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at all he did. He took water that he was bathing with and he sprinkled on her very gently. Right? Right? And she says, and people confirm this, they say around her, she grew older, much older. And still, even in her old age, her face was the most youthful face in the city. Subhanallah. Imagine that. And this is a narration that is confirmed by many of the Sahabas. MashaAllah. This goes to show you the blessing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many people will like, it could be a coincidence or a quinkydink. May Allah bless you if you believe that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But there's no doubt that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had many blessings, and just being in his company was a great blessing. Now, there's a Sahabi. His name is his name is Mahmud ibn Rabi'a, and he was 5 years old at the time. And Al-Bukhari named a whole chapter after this guy, after Mahmud ibn Rabi'a. And the chapter is called Bab Yasihhu Sama' al-Saghir. The chapter, it is permissible to hear from the young. Now what is this guy's story? He says, we were playing along in the street having a water fight. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came and he joined us and he sprinkled water on me. And this was the first time Mahmud ibn Rabi' met the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and it was the last time he met the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ passed away right away after that. And so this goes to show you that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was playful even in the latter days of his life, when he was very old, very frail, and very ill. He was still playful and youthful with the children that he was around with. Some of us use old age as an excuse. Yeah, I can't even move, I'm breaking down, my body is failing on me. It's time to retire and spend my time. And it's not an excuse. So sometimes we meet the oldest people and they're the most beautiful and sweetest of people ever. And sometimes we meet the oldest people and pray janazah if you encounter them, right? Subhanallah. And he says, I don't remember anything from my youthful times, my childhood, except this one incident. And he was 5, and he remembered it. And he swore directly, Al-Bukhari was sworn, he's like, this is a true narration, and I actually remember very clearly. So Al-Bukhari mentioned the whole chapter saying it is permissible to hear from a young person, even at that age, if they confirm that the narration is authentic, and other people around the Prophet who were, some people did verify the narration, subhanAllah. And once Anas ibn Malik narrates again, mashallah, what a great Sahabi he was, mashallah, Anas, for delivering to us all these beautiful stories of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, once we were, right, and this is really, really touching, he says, once the kids were playing around, and Al-Husayn was playing, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes in, and he's chasing Al-Husayn playfully, and he's like, Amsikuka ya Husayn, Amsikuka, right, I'm gonna catch you, I'm gonna catch you, I'm gonna catch you. And he says Al-Husayn was zigzagging, like in and out, right and left, trying to avoid the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was right behind him. And Al-Husayn would stop when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would get close, and then he would accelerate quickly. That playful children, mashallah. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally caught him, and he told him, you're not gonna get away now. And then he held him close to him, and he said, Wallahi, Allahumma, oh Allah, I love him, so love him. Oh Allah, bear witness that I love Al-Husayn, so love him. And once the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was trying to playfully attract Al-Husayn to come to him so he can have some playtime, and the Prophet ﷺ gently stuck his tongue out, and Al-Husayn really saw it from afar away, so he came to play with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Then he held him and he said, Husayn minni wa ana min Husayn. Husayn is of me and I am of Husayn. Look at the way the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was very playful. Now he wasn't just sharing the good times, he would also share the bad times with children. Now most children, their tragedies are not, like the tragedies we would experience as a person of old age, as an aging person. Like a tragedy for them would be losing a cat, losing a bird. And that's what happened with Abu Umayr, right? Who was the brother of Anas, something that we don't usually mention. But he was the brother of Anas, and that's what Anas mentioned in the narration. And he says, Abu Umayr, this was his nickname, right? Which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave him. Imagine that. So Abu Umayr lost his bird, and Abu Umayr was just sitting there very sad, like, oh man, I lost my bird. Like, and some, subhanAllah, some of the shuyukh, when they described the way he was sad, they would say, it was so sad that it's like the equivalent of one of us losing his wife, children, house, and everything he owns in one night. It's like, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But for him, because that's all he's a kid. They're emotional. They don't have the maturity yet. They don't have the cognitive maturity yet. So he was very touched and affected by it. So he was crying. And the Prophet Muhammad comes to him, Ya Aba Umayr, ma fa'al al-Nughayr? Ya Aba Umayr, ma fa'al al-Nughayr? What happened? Oh Aba Umayr, what happened to al-Nughayr? What happened to al-Nughayr? Which is the bird. And so he smiled with Abu Umayr, and then Abu Umayr forgot completely about the bird and the death and whatnot, and he began to smile. He began to play with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This goes to show you how playful with the Prophet Muhammad was. And mashallah, what better way to prove that the Prophet Muhammad loved the children more than the fact that, subhanAllah, many things, memorizing the Quran gets you places, really beautiful places, jihad gets you really beautiful places, charity gets you beautiful places, fasting gets you beautiful places, but nothing gets you as close to the Prophet Muhammad in his own words, more than sponsoring the orphans. أَنَا وَكَافِلَ الْيَتِيمِ كَهَاتَيْنِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. And he pointed to his index and middle fingers, and he said, I and the person who sponsors the orphan are like this in Jannah. This goes to show how loving he was to the people, and how he cared about the people who did not have parents to make them happy, who did not have, a family. Like he had no mother, no father. SubhanAllah. So he went the extra step in promising that and in asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ensure that for the person who sponsored the orphans. What great love, subhanAllah, the Prophet. And then people come, oh, Islam is a violent religion. Go home, man, and do some research. What are you talking about? The most loving person. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And then some of us get doubtful. Some of our own children is like, yeah, Islam could be violent. I don't really know, because they're not informed about the Prophet Muhammad and they're raised confused. They don't have any information about who the Prophet Muhammad was, and it's so easy to deceive them and tell them, oh, this and this and this, and take and pick little sections from the seerah here and there and misrepresent them through subhanAllah, deceitful ways. So it's very important for us to educate the children. Continuing about that, inshallah, the whole session is about children. So I'm sorry, this is the topic the whole time. Inshallah, by the time you go home tonight, inshallah, you're going to be hugging and kissing your children. Also, this subject is useless. So inshallah, it does touch us and affect us. The Prophet Muhammad once elongated the sujood. And we know this, but let's remember, inshallah, he elongated the sujood to the point where people behind it began to question, okay, the Prophet ﷺ is either dead or there's like some serious revelation coming. This is a very long surah coming to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Jibreel picked the wrong time to come to tell the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ a new revelation. So they all began to wonder, and the Prophet ﷺ finally said, Allahu Akbar, and Assalamu alaikum. Then they came to him, what happened? He says, Al-Husayn, in another narration, Hassan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, one of the grandchildren of the Prophet Muhammad came and stayed on top of the Prophet Muhammad while he was in sujood. So he said, I increase the pray time so I don't interfere with his playtime. SubhanAllah. Imagine this was us. Do you not understand what salah is, ya akhi? The first thing we're going to be judged is salah in akhirah. Let me finish my salah. You are innama amwalukum wa awladukum fitna. Right, you are a big trial for me. Get away from me, you little devil. The Prophet Muhammad was not like that at all. He had the conscious ability to understand and relate to the people he was dealing with. The emotional awareness, subhanAllah. You have to deal emotionally on this, with the level of the people. You have to understand that. You have to have the maturity to understand who you're dealing with and relate to them, subhanAllah. Abu Hurairah, Abu Hurairah narrates this. He says, once the Prophet Muhammad was playing with Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn, and he really enjoyed the time he wants to spend with them, to the point where he would elongate. Abu Hurairah should say, should I take them home now? It's getting late, should I take them home now? And the Prophet Muhammad wanted to enjoy the company, so he would elongate the time he would spend with Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn. And then finally, when it started to, like thunder began to hit, and it got very lightening, then the Prophet Muhammad said, take him home now. And Abu Hurairah said, the sky was very lit, it was very beautiful, until I delivered Al-Hasan and Husayn to their mother. Then the sky just got dark all of a sudden back again. Imagine that, all these things that we can learn from, beautiful iman boosters here and there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it very carefully. He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it is because of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you became lenient and soft with them. And if you were harsh and strong-hearted, they would have been repulsed away from you. We know the ayah. So this is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. Quick question, inshallah, and there's a prize for whoever gets this. When was this ayah revealed, and what is the reason for revelation? Alhamdulillah, I don't want to give the gift of time. That's good.
What's the price? I'm going to tell you for that.
Who's checking on Google? Hey, put the phone away. La hawla, hey, you too. La hawla wa quwwata illa billah. So actually, when the Prophet and Sahaba went to Mecca to make their first Hajj, close before that. It was actually after the Battle of Uhud, when a lot of the Muslims went against the command of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was given the hikmah and the love and the rahmah to be patient with them and to not get angry with them. He forgave them and he consulted them, and that's the reason for revelation. And so subhanAllah, just so we understand the reason for revelation as well. Remember when Zayd ibn Haritha, who was basically the adopted son of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, until the verse came to basically abolish that adoption. He basically was actually given the choice when his father came back and he said, should I take him? And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they both agreed with his father, let him make the choice. So imagine that he's getting Zayd ibn Haritha to choose. And he says, Wallahi la uqaddimu alayka ahadan ya Rasulullah. By Allah, I would not prefer anyone over you, O Messenger of Allah. Even his own father. He'd rather stay with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ than his own father. That goes to show you how loving the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. This is a great testimony to his love. Another one is Qais bint Mihsan, and she says, I once took my baby to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the baby, which I think it was a girl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, I think it was a girl, she peed on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, urinated on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then she got very upset. The mother said, oh, what's going to happen? And the Prophet Muhammad very casually said, no, it's okay, no worries about it. And this is when he says, بَوْلُ الْغُلَامِ يُنْضَجْ وَبَوْلُ الْجَارِيَةِ يُغْسَلْ. The urination or the urine of the boy should be just water should be poured on top, and just wiped away, and then the bowl of the girl should be washed, right? And this is when that narration came. Now, one of the other narrations is Al-Aqra', when he says, I came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and I would see him always kissing Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein, and then I came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and I told him, I have 10 kids, I don't do this to them. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, what am I going to do? Who am I to be blamed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the mercy away from you, from your heart? Imagine that, subhanAllah. Some of us think that it's manly to not, to be this, repulsive person. You come into the house, I want to show and to be shown respect. I want to come to the house and my kids have to know that I'm the man. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the best man. Literally, the best man. But he was the most loving man. And he didn't, intimidate people into respecting him. He earned their trust, love, compassion, and he earned their heart. And that's why it's these same men that went on to do the greatest things that this ummah has witnessed. We know that to be true. We know that condition. Subhanallah. And this is when he said, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا. He is not of us or she is not of us. Any individual who does not show mercy to the young, to the infants and the young. Now, one other example is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's actually sunnah, and you'll see that some of the imams, when they're reciting, right, they would cut the salah short, make the salah shorter if they hear a baby in the jama'ah crying. What a great sunnah. He hears a baby crying, he doesn't want to elongate the prayer. His heart, it can't have khushu', he can't. He feels for that baby crying, so he cuts the prayer short so the mother of that baby can, comfort that baby and the baby can stop crying. SubhanAllah. The most great thing, the most important aspect of faith, the salah, the greatest act of worship, he cuts it short in accommodation for the young baby crying. SubhanAllah, what a great blessing. And maybe what people say, oh, it's just boys. No, the granddaughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Umama, was crying once in the room when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praying on his own. So he went, picked her up, and continued praying. Subhanallah, continued praying. Once the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving, in Jum'ah khutbah, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was delivering a lecture, and then he sees two little guys at the back, and their thobe is long. That's the first time they're wearing a thobe. So they're trying to come to the front, and the thobe is long, so they're tripping. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam fears for them, so he gets from the minbar, gets down, walks over to them, and picks them up, and he's, subhanAllah, he feels for them, and this is Hasan Hussein. Right, and that's when he says his beautiful words, and also this is also one of the times he said, "Innama amwalukum wa auladukum fitna," implying the fitna could also be a beautiful thing. Like the kids could be a fitna, and if you pass, mashallah, it's a great blessing if you actually show that love and the respect to them, subhanallah, and the mercy to them. And so imagine the Prophet Muhammad cutting the khutbah, interrupting the khutbah, getting down from the minbar, picking the kids up and coming back, and delivering and continuing the khutbah with them. And this happened during the Prophet Muhammad many times. Many kids would come and play with the Prophet Muhammad and he would pick them up during the salah. Once, and this goes to show you the honesty of the Prophet Muhammad. I really love this one. I really love this one. There was a mother, he saw her, and one day she was calling her kid. And trying to get her kid, she was hiding something in her hand. She's like, come here, I have something for you. And so the Prophet Muhammad, he came to her and he says, are you really going to give him something? Like, do you really have something in your hand? And then she says, yeah, I'm going to give him dates. And the Prophet Muhammad says, لَوْ لَمْ تُعْطِهِ شَيْئًا كُتِبَتْ عَلَيْكِ كَذِبًا. If you don't actually give him something, it will be written as a lie against you, as though you actually lied. A lot of us think that kids at that age, they're not conscious enough to really understand. They're not going to know that. No, the Prophet Muhammad was sincere, conscious, and consistent. His private life was matched with his public life. There was that synchrony between the two. There was no hypocrisy. There was no we're just among children now, don't worry about it. No, it wasn't like that. He actually made sure that these children were brought up in a proper household, in the proper etiquettes, experiencing proper moral character, moral behavior from day one. And that's why they were brought up strong. Don't tell your kid, listen, you gotta be honest, okay? Honest is important. Ghish, cheating is not, whoever cheats us is not from us. And then someone calls you in the house, your son or daughter picks up, and you're like, tell him I'm not here. And then the kid's like, my dad says he's not here. SubhanAllah. And then you blame him. Why are you lying, man? Where do you get this stuff? We don't lie in the household. We have a history of being honest people, and you, where do you come from? Where did you get your genes? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This happens all the time. Be consistent in the way you deal with the children. SubhanAllah. One beautiful narration, inshallah. And I want, inshallah, try to stay attentive, inshallah. Hopefully one or two of these stories will resonate and will impact, inshallah. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was once sitting down. I really love this story. On his right, there's Anas ibn Malik. Some other narrations, most strongest narration is it was Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik was very young at this time, very young boy. On his right, on his left, two wise men, full beards, mashallah. Some narrations say Abu Bakr, Umar. Very important sahabis were on his left. Okay? Now the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is handed something to drink from. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ drinks and he looks on his right, looks on his left. The sunnah is to go from right to left. So he's like, oh, this is a bit of a tricky situation. If I give it to the young boy, I'm going to show disrespect to the two wise men. So he looks at the young boy, Anas ibn Malik, he says, أَتَأْذَنُ لِي أَنْ أَسْقِيَ الشَّيْخَيْنِ. Do you give me permission to allow the two wise men to drink? Anas ibn Malik is like, no! I don't give you no permission to allow the two wise men to drink. And now, imagine if this was us. Imagine if this was you in the company of like presidents or important people and your son's like, no, I want to drink. You'd be like, boom, get out of here. I'm calling the moral behavior class which just started running at the masjid and enrolling you in that. What is this? Where did you get this akhlaq from? No, the Prophet Muhammad said, لَكَ هَذَا, it's your right. Drink, no problem. And then the two wise men later, asked, why? And Anas ibn Malik said, I want to consolidate on the blessings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ by drinking from the exact same spot on the cup where his blessed lips touched. SubhanAllah. What love. What love. And honestly, SubhanAllah, having been, anybody who's been brought up in the Middle East or brought up in that part of the world, there's no care or attention given to children. I remember once as a young boy, like 7, 8, I went to get some meat from the butcher place. I was there for 3 hours until I started crying. Because everybody was just getting in line, the butcher's giving all these places. And I've been looking, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get that piece of the meat. You know how they hang the whole, and they start chopping off and giving it. I'm like, I'm going to get that piece of the meat, it looks nice. And then that piece gets taken away. Okay, I'm going to get that one, and then it gets taken away. Okay, how about that one? And then there was nothing left except like one little thing. I'm like, SubhanAllah, I'm not going to get anything. And then I started crying, and then the butcher's like, oh, sorry, we didn't notice you were there. Right, but the Prophet ﷺ would give attention and pay attention to the youngest people. And we all know this. Anybody, this is not like an isolated incident. Anybody who's grown up in that part of the world, most of the time, there's no attention or care or respect or any awareness given, conscious awareness, paid attention to children or youngsters in general. Now, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and there's many variations of this narration, but this is a beautiful one, really, really beautiful, another beautiful one. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he came into Mecca, great, mashallah, beautiful, the whole thing, we can have a whole khutbah dedicated to the way he dealt with the people of Mecca after doing all the injustice against him and the forgiveness he showed. Many beautiful things, mashallah. But there's one little narration that we usually forget, and that narration is there was a boy who was not Muslim at the time, he was from Quraysh. And that boy heard the adhan of Bilal. When the Prophet told Bilal, go and do the adhan. So that boy heard the adhan of Bilal. And this boy started to mimic it. He's like, and he's like putting it in his head. It sounds nice. And he's like, I can totally do better than Bilal. What does this guy think? Bilal can do? I can totally do better than Bilal. So the Prophet Muhammad heard this. So he's like, take me to the boy. I want to talk to him. The boy heard the Prophet Muhammad was coming for him. So he's like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I'm probably going to get tonight. So then they tell him the Prophet Muhammad is looking for you. The Prophet Muhammad finally finds him and he says, I heard he said something. He's like, no, I didn't say nothing. I didn't say absolutely. The Prophet said, I heard he said Bilal's adhan is something about, no, Bilal's adhan is great, mashallah. Right? He wasn't saying great at the time, mashallah. But you get the idea, right? So he said, no, let me hear your adhan. And he heard his adhan, he actually assigned him to be a mu'adhin at that young age after he accepted Islam. Imagine, what a beautiful, beautiful story. SubhanAllah, and this is a great lesson for all of us. The Prophet Muhammad was ready to give any child the position that he was suitable for, if he qualified for it. And he pushed children to be in the positions that we think are meant for adults. He was not afraid to give them that responsibility. And that's why they grew up with such, mashallah, strong character. Right? We know the story of Umar ibn Salama, or Amr ibn Salama, when he was with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was like walking with him and he sat with him and they were eating together and they're in a great company of great people, mashallah. Imagine, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wasn't hanging out with like little kids or little babies or, but little babies would like to come and enjoy it. He would allow them. He would be hanging out with important people and little kids would be coming in. So imagine the Prophet Muhammad is in the company of very important people and this little kid is with him and he's starting to eat from all over the plate. And we know this one. And the Prophet Muhammad is not, la hawla, ya akhi, what is this? This is not how you eat. No, the Prophet Muhammad is very gentle. He says, Ya ghulam, samillah, wa kul biyaminik, wa kul mimma yalik. We know this, very common, very, very known. He says, oh youngster. Right? Look at the way he called, beautiful, beautiful respect. Mention the name of Allah. Eat with your right and eat from what is in front of you. Look at the advice. He doesn't say, listen, this is a plate. Don't dig here and there and there and there. He doesn't tell him, don't do. He skips the whole blame and he tells him what to do. This is a great lesson for all of us. As parents, don't spend half an hour. Don't do this and get the person to right? Because what happens is the more you dwell on the wrong that the person has done, the more you get them to feel guilty. And the more dissonance and distance and gap you build between you and the person you're advising. So the Prophet Muhammad had the emotional awareness. He knew how to approach the youngsters and how to speak to them, right? Give them the advice they need without intimidating them into feeling inferior in the company of the Prophet Muhammad. Because he was not there to prove, I am better than you. No, he was there to tell them, you can get closer to a position that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted for you through this Islam. And it's rahmah for the alameen. Beautiful, beautiful, mashallah. One more is Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu. Right? Ibn Abbas, and actually, Samara ibn Jundub was, he says, I was young, and the Prophet Muhammad would allow me to sit with him in the company of great scholars. Abdullah ibn Umar was allowed to pray, and he was allowed to lead people at a very young age. He would be sitting with them in great scholarly. Imagine he's sitting with like Abu Bakr Uthman, and there's like the little kid Abdullah ibn Umar. He was allowed to sit in the company of like such halaqahs. Imagine nowadays, like, akhi, listen, you're too young to be in the company of such great men, and go play something, go play a game or something. None of that. He allowed the people to experience that blessing and that, subhanAllah. Some of us, as parents, this is a great problem of the Muslim community, is that we let the kids stay distance from the proper Islamic lifestyle and the halaqat and then we blame them later on. What happened to you? Why did you turn out so bad? Well, that because you weren't taking me with you to the masjid, right? Be wise in how you plan your children's development, subhanAllah, and know that the very early stages of a person's life, a child's life, these are detrimental if you do negative things, and these are the most defining moments if you are positive with them. They will have a huge impact on the way the children grow up. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu in a narration by Ibn Abbas, he says he was riding a donkey. The Prophet Muhammad riding a donkey? Yeah, the Prophet Muhammad riding a donkey. Look how humble he was, subhanAllah. And he says he took Ibn Abbas and he put him with him on top of the donkey. And then he says, listen, Ya Ghulaym, which is basically a beautiful way of saying Ya Ghulam. Look at the way he's calling the children. إِنِّي أُعَلِّمُكَ كَلِمَاتٍ تَحْفَظْهَا. I'm going to teach you words that you should remember and should protect in your memory. احفظ الله يحفظك احفظ الله تجده تجاهك. Right? And we know these, all of us know this when we start memorizing the hadith. But look at the way he spoke, look at the way he gave him the advice. Right? SubhanAllah. Look at the way he gives them the advice. And then there's another one where he would make dua for the children. This was a common thing of the Prophet Muhammad. He would actually make dua for many of the children. Remember when he made the dua for Ibn Abbas, he says, Ya Allah, Allahumma faqih fi din. Oh Allah, allow him to attain a high intellectual understanding and conscious understanding of the deeper religious sciences. And read the tafsir of Ibn Abbas. You're like, subhanAllah, at this age this guy was writing this way, having such an understanding and a depth of the Quran. Look at the words and the dream he had of Uqba ibn Nafi'. And then how he held him and told him, Uqba, I saw this dream that you were having all these dates and collecting them and you're coming back into. And this same guy is the guy who comes and he opens. He sends Islam and brings Islam to many people in North Africa. Look at the way the Prophet Muhammad dealt with the cousin of Uqba ibn Nafi', which was Amr ibn Asim, the one who opened Egypt and brought Islam to Egypt. Look at the way he was with these people. And all these guys, these important pillars of Islam, all of them, you will notice that they were impacted by either a word that the Prophet Muhammad told them very early on, or a dua he made for them very early on. Don't ever think that the little comment or the murmur or the thing that you're going to utter to your child is not going to have an impact. You might think it's small, you might think it's just not going to have an impact. No. Every little thing you can say to a child will have an impact on the child. And subhanAllah, some of the children, Allah, when they open up to you, like at Islamic schools or whatnot, they will tell you, my dad said to me this like 5-6 years ago when I was 4 or 5, and I still remember to this day. And he will never tell you, oh dad, I remember you said this negative thing that affected me. He will be in denial about it, he will try to be nice about it and try to say, because he doesn't want you to feel guilty. But wallahi, that negative comment that you say to your children or your child, it will resonate within his mindset or her mindset for a very long time. And that negative comment could be the reason why that child goes on a downward spiral, losing confidence in himself, losing confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine the child saying, if my mom and dad, the ones who brought me into this world, don't have faith in me and don't have confidence in me and are always telling me negative things, then what? Right? You are supposed to be, as a father, as a parent, as a mother, the most supportive pillar in your child's development. Your child is born into this world not as an angel. It's a child. He will make mistakes. She will make mistakes. But advise them in the way that the Prophet Muhammad advised. And we're going to see some beautiful hadith, subhanAllah, that sometimes bring tears to the eyes. SubhanAllah, the Prophet Muhammad, he made Umar ibn Salama lead people in salah at a very young age. Just another example, subhanAllah. He also, when the dates were collected, all the harvest was collected, he would find the newest born child in the city and he would give him a share of the dates as a gift. Look at the beauty of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet Muhammad advised us to make dua for our children from very early age. He says there are three people that the du'as are always accepted. And he mentioned one of them is the dua of the father or the mother to the child. Your dua to your son can shape that son or child's life forever. Forever, wallahi, forever. You will meet people and you're like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. What happened to you? They're really bad people, they're away from the deen, and then their mother or father are really, really struggling in the sujood, making dua, and boom, out of nothing, that person completely comes around, rotates, and becomes a very important pillar of the Muslim community. And you're wondering what happened. And subhanAllah, you're surprised of how amazing the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and the miracle of a father or a mother's dua. And that could also jeopardize an entire future of a child. Because unfortunately, wal'iyadu billah, right? And this is something common among the Arabs in the Jahiliyyah. When they got upset or angry, something upset them, they would make dua against a child. Remember when when Aisha, very long narration, Aisha was being carried by Mustah, she slipped, Mustah made dua against Mustah. She said, may Mustah be cursed, cursing her own child. So please, as parents, don't ever make dua against your children. It's so ridiculous. I know sometimes they'll anger you, they'll hurt you, it's hard, but don't make dua against them. The reason why they're upsetting you is because they are not in sync with the way you want them to be, and the blessed way and the character of people like Yahya and how he was, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions him in the Quran, and Isa, وَبَرًّا بِوَالِدَيْهِ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ جَبَّارًا عَصِيًّا. Right? You want them to be like that. But don't make dua against them. You're upset because they're bad. May Allah make you worse. Wallahi, you hear this all the time. Wallahi, I hear this all the time. All the time. Especially with certain people from certain countries which we're going to refrain from saying. But the Prophet Muhammad taught us to make dua for our own children, even before they're conceived. The Prophet Muhammad says, if the rajul and if the wife and the husband make dua on the night before they alhamdulillah have that romantic encounter, they say, Allahumma jannibna shaitan wa jannib shaitan ma razaqtana. Oh Allah, protect us or help us avoid the shaitan and keep the shaitan away from whatever you bless us with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if they do conceive a baby that night, that baby will be protected from shaitan. From very early age, make dua for your kids. Even before they're born, you're making dua. Yes, before you're born, you make dua for them. And this goes to show you, subhanAllah, how the Prophet Muhammad was very attentive to the needs of the children. And imagine when he would come to the children, he would enjoy that time with them when they're born, right as soon as they're born. When he would recommend for the Sahaba to name them nicely. One of the things about the Jahiliyyah is that they would name their kids like the weirdest names ever, right? They would name them like dog or monster or like cat, cow. Very repulsive names. The Prophet Muhammad said, no, name your kids beautiful names. And he said the best of names are like Abdullah, right? Names of Allah, Abdullah, Abdul Rahman, and Muhammad, Ahmad. We know that. And then he says the other best names are the ones that give the child a strong character. Like name them strong names, like motivationary names. Right? He said that. Strong names and motivationary names. ذو همة وذو علو. Right? ذو همة وذو علو, mashallah. He says that. And he says it's makruh to actually name your kids negative names. Subhanallah. And there's another one by Khalid. This is another beautiful narration. And listen to this, inshallah. Try to stay patient with us. She came to the Prophet Muhammad when she was young, when she was very young. She came to the Prophet Muhammad and she was a very young girl. She grew up to be Khalid, and she narrates this when she was the mother of Khalid. And she says, I came in, I was playing with the Prophet Muhammad at a very young age. I was playing with the Prophet Muhammad and I put my hand down, right, and I touched the seal of prophethood on his back. And then my father freaked out. I said, what are you doing to the Prophet Muhammad? And the Prophet Muhammad smiled and he said, Da'ha. Let her, leave her alone. It's not a big deal, she's a child. Leave her alone. Right? Let her be. So, and this is a great lesson for us. Sometimes we restrict the explorative, curious nature within our children. Some of our children are born, mashallah, they're the most curious they have amazing curiosity. What is this? What is that? What is this? Guide them, be there. And don't be like, oh khalas, you're a curious person, go explore the world, enjoy it, go ahead. May Allah will be with you. I'll make dua from here. Don't do that, but at the same time, don't be like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Don't restrict them. And then you wonder, subhanAllah, these kids of this guy, my neighbor, his kids are doctors. My other neighbor, his kids are engineers. And you, subhanAllah, you want to blaze this? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I sacrifice everything for you. And now you are making me, my nose down on the ground. I can't even walk outside because everybody will look at me and say, what have you done? No kid, you did not raise no children. We say these things to our children and they hurt. They hurt a lot. When you do counseling with children, wallahi subhanAllah, you ask Sheikh Ala or any of the shuyukh that have been doing counseling for many, and they will tell you the most, subhanAllah, most hurtful thing a parent can do to a child is say something negative, especially if that child is sensitive. And you can, there are ways to recognize, sensitive children. The Prophet Muhammad knew how to deal with that, to recognize that. Now, he made dua to Khalid, the little girl that was exploring, his back, subhanAllah. So he made dua for her, and he says, may Allah, because she was wearing a yellow dress. It was a very cute yellow dress. So he says, may Allah allow you to wear more and more, and may they wear out and you get more and more. Meaning, may Allah give you long life to enjoy wearing more, and beautiful, beautiful dua that he gave to her. And he also was not afraid to allow the children to have that responsibility that we mentioned before, to be responsible. He gave bay'ah to Ibn Zubayr and he was 7 years old. He recognized this is a guy, he gets it. And this is a guy, he's smart at a young age, so invest in him. He made him give bay'ah. Imagine nowadays, a president comes and he says, I feel like this child over here who's 7 years old can make a very good politician, so I'm going to basically assign him for one of the governmental positions. The nation will be like, La hawla wa la, what are you? Twitter, president gone crazy. Subhanallah. And the way he gave advice, I think this is one of the best narrations that we have. And the name of the guy is not known, but I think it is mentioned in Al-Bukhari. He says, the Prophet Muhammad saw a kid, he was throwing a stone at the date tree to get the dates to fall out. And imagine if this was on one of us. This stone, look how big it is. If this lands on somebody's head, it will chop them in half, and then you will go to jail and be criminalized for the rest of your life. You will have no job, no children, no future. The way we advise, but look at the way the Prophet Muhammad advises. eat from what is on the ground, if it is clean it and just eat from what's on the ground, right? And he makes dua for him. أشبع الله بطنك. SubhanAllah. May Allah allow your stomach to be full. Eat from what's on the ground, eat from what's pure, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow your stomach to be full. What great advice, what great manner of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam dealt with children. And just to give you an idea, imagine this comes at a time when just a few years before the prophecy, prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, girls would be buried alive. Let's put things into perspective. Girls will be buried alive out of shame. And here the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, just imagine the contrast. Just to understand the blessed character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Once Abi Mas'ud narrates an Uqbah al-Mudin Ansari, he comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, "O Messenger of Allah, I like to go late for Salat al-Subh, Salat al-Fajr, because the Imam, he takes too long. So I like to come late so I don't get bored. Because he takes too long, so I like to, some of us like, I know this guy's going to take like an hour or two, so I'm just going to come in the last ayah of the last rak'ah. Right? Allah Akbar, and I'm just going to make the last rak'ah. So the Prophet Muhammad got very upset. He went to that person, he gave him the advice. Be conscious of the people behind you. There are old people, there are young people, there are people of different ages with different responsibilities. And he mentions there are young people. And there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, if it weren't for the people, the old people that are praying and the young children that are breastfeeding, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not have restrained the adhab away from you. So a lot of us think, we don't understand that the children that are among us and the old people that are among us, the righteous of us, are holding the adhab of Allah from the rest of us. So they are actually a blessing. And that's why, subhanAllah, you will hear from many people in the community, when they're blessed with a child, rizq comes from nowhere, you didn't even expect it. It's not for you, it's meant for that child. You're just the vehicle through which that rizq comes for that child. So our children are gates of provision from Allah towards us. We should not forget that. Right? And this was the Prophet Muhammad made it very clear to us. SubhanAllah. And the Prophet Muhammad, and I'm going to mention a few narrations here. The Prophet Muhammad said beautifully, "Man wassa'a Allahu alayhi falyuwassi' ala 'iyalihi." Whoever Allah has made vast provision for, then be vast with the provision towards your children. If Allah gave you a lot, give a lot to your children. How many times do we go to a place that this hadith is mentioned? We already discussed these things, and mashallah, these are very, very authentic narrations that you'll find in Bukhari and Muslim. وما أنفقت شيئا على ولدك أو أهلك إلا هو صدقة. The Prophet Muhammad said, there's nothing that you can spend on your children and your wife except that it will count as a sadaqah. And another narration, and on yourself. Imagine spending on your children as sadaqah. What a beautiful faith. Subhanallah. And then the Prophet Muhammad says, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ إِثْمًا أَنْ يُضَيَّعَ مَنْ. It's enough of a sin for an individual to not be up to the responsibility of the people that he is entrusted with. To allow them to go astray, or to allow them to not be, to not be provided and brought up properly, that is enough of a sin. Enough. You don't need to worry about any other sin. If you are entrusted with these children, and you don't provide for them, you don't show them the love, the compassion, and you actually don't give them the right they deserve, that is enough of an ith. That is enough of a sin. Oh, I'm here in the masjid, I'm trying to pray, and I'm trying to make dua for my children. Spend time with children. Bring them to the masjid. Be with them, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is expecting of you. And that's something that you'll see throughout the sunnah. The Prophet Muhammad said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses a person with 3 daughters, 3 sisters, or 2 daughters and 2 sisters, فَأَكْرَمَهُنَّ وَأَحْسَنَ إِلَيْهِنَّ كَانَ لَهُ سِتْرًا مِنْ نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ. And he's good to them, and he shows them mercy, then they will be as a barrier for him, between him and Jahannam. So in that is a beautiful lesson for us. Take care of your sisters. take care of your daughters, take care of your mothers, take care of the girls in the community, take care of the sisters, mashallah. And then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in another narration by Abu Dawood, he says, من كان عنده بنت فلم يئدها ولم يهنها ولم يفضل ولده عليها دخل الجنة. And يئدها معناه يدفنها. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, whoever has a daughter and he doesn't bury her alive, which was the common practice of the Jahili Arabs, and he doesn't show disrespect to her, nor does he emotionally oppress her, and he doesn't prefer his boys over her, he doesn't distinguish, I like a boy more than a girl, then Allah will give him Jannah. And in this, people say, Islam is not about equality, women get more than men, but all that has wisdom. There is beautiful, blessed positioning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us through Islam, and there's beautiful, fair treatment given to the women and the men. And it's not supposed to be looking at the women, in a less position than your men. It's not preferable position or any of that. There is beautiful lesson from this hadith that we can all learn. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, actually this is a great, one of the shuyukh was mentioning this. He says, imagine the messenger, listen to this carefully. The messenger who spoke to Allah, who was that? Musa alayhi salam, Kalimullah, had to serve for many years to earn the heart of the daughter of the righteous man in narration Shu'aib. Even Kalimullah had to serve for years to earn the heart and the right to stay with the daughter of the righteous man in Surah Al-Qasas that we know. So imagine for that. And you say, well, no. You're not Kalimullah, you're not Musa. And Musa, subhanAllah, he had to work as a servant in the household, do all the chores, subhanAllah. So if Allah gave you the strength, use it to serve your family. And Aisha, anha, she says, the Prophet Muhammad spent the majority of his time in the household serving his family. Don't say, I'm a man, I'm not going to cook, I'm not going to clean. The Prophet Muhammad did all those things. And there are many narrations to back that up, subhanAllah. Aisha, anha, alhamdulillah, inshallah, we're going to, spike up. A lot of stories, huh? Is it getting boring? Inshallah. Okay. Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, there was a very poor woman, right? A poor woman, very poor woman, came and she knocked the door of Aisha radiallahu anha. And then Aisha, she didn't have much. She just had 3 dates. This woman had 2 daughters with her. So she gave the daughter one date, then she gave the other daughter one date, then she gave the mother a date. 2 girls and the mother, she gave each one a date. Then the 2 little girls ate the date because they were so hungry. Then the mother took the date that she had, divided it in half, and gave one to the girl and the other to the girl. So Aisha was so touched by this that she told the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ this narration. Then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, بَشِّرِيهَا بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ كَتَبَ لَهَا الْجَنَّةِ بِصَنْعِهَا هَذَا. Bring her the glad tidings and the good news that Allah has given her Jannah because of this action that she did. That little action entered and granted her Jannah. SubhanAllah. We think that these little things, and SubhanAllah, we think that taking care of your sister, taking care of your daughter, taking care of any member of the household is a little thing. It could be the reason you get to Jannah. Like really, it could be the reason you get to Jannah. And that's like, it's all over the Sunnah. SubhanAllah. Another beautiful example is Umar radiallahu anhu. To show you how they carried the Sunnah forward. It's not just the Prophet Muhammad Umar, the fiercest of men, as we think of him. He still had a beautiful heart. Look at this. He was, kissing one of his children, and then one of the people that Umar put in charge of one of the wilayas of one of the states. He was one of the head of the states during Umar's time. He came to me, he's like, "What are you doing? You're kissing. We don't do that. I don't do that to any of my children." Then Umar reacted in the most, subhanAllah, confused look. He's like, "And you take pride in saying that you don't show compassion to your children?" He said to him, نزعه من عمله, and he says, إن كنت لا ترحم ولدك كيف ترحم الناس? He took away from him the responsibility of taking care of the state. So he fired him, and he told him, if you don't show mercy to your own child, how are you going to show mercy to the people that you're in charge of? Subhanallah. If you can't show mercy to the person you brought into this earth, how are you going to show mercy to the people that you're in charge of in a state or politically or whatever you want to call it? Subhanallah. We're coming to the last page, alhamdulillah. Some people are like, man, this is the longest lecture we've attended on children. Alhamdulillah. Right? Al-Hasan and Hussein once got lost. Hassan and Hussein once got lost. Then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he would always be looking for them. So he noticed that they got lost. So he started to get worried. So he asked everybody, look, we gotta look around to find them. So they split in groups. Ibn Abbas came with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So everybody's in groups. Ibn Abbas was with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, two of them looking for them. And then they came in a very, very remote area. And they found Al-Hasan and Hussein holding each other. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ knew something was up. They were like literally clung together from the fear and they were shaky. And so the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ looks and he finds a snake or something living, like basically something that's dangerous. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he actually comes and soothingly, he speaks in gentle. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had beautiful ways. And subhanAllah, he spoke gently to the creature, and the creature walked away into the desert. And then he picked Al-Hasan and Hussein and put them on his back, one side each, and then he lifted them up. Now, sorry, this was not, it's Salman who was with him. I don't know, what did I say, Ibn Abbas before? If I said Ibn Abbas, it was not Ibn Abbas, it was Salman al-Farisi. He's the one who narrated this, he said I was with the Prophet. Now Salman says, Ni'am al-Jamal, Jamalukuma, right? The best camel is this camel that carries you. Jokingly with the Prophet, what a camel you got, like you're on top of the best ride, like you're riding the best ride, mashallah. And then the Prophet Muhammad says, وَنِعْمَ الْفَارِسَانِ هُمَا وَأَبُوهُمَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُمَا. And what great farisan, what great warriors they are, because who rides on a camel? Who rides on a horse? A warrior. And he says, and they're better warriors, and their father was even a greater warrior. Subhanallah. Al-Jullas came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And she says, my baby is very sick. I want you to do ruqya on my baby. Now, if you ever attended ruqya, some of the ruqya is that you gotta slightly blow some air on the child. Right? Very slightly, not wet. Right? Gently blow some air while you're reading the Quran. Now, the baby was very young and it was sick. So the Prophet Muhammad would read Quran and then the baby would onto the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the baby would read the Prophet Muhammad would read some more and then blow gently on the baby, and then the baby would spit on the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Continuously back and forth. And the mom is like, oh, this is awkward. Like, come on, let me take her away from you. And the Prophet Muhammad was like, let her, leave her alone. Imagine if this was us. It's a sick baby, man. Bring a mask, bring this, subhanAllah, bring gloves, hold the baby, stay away. And you read the Quran, stay away from me. No, the Prophet Muhammad was very, very loving towards the children. Very loving towards the children. And this was, some of the blessed manners we know of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And just one more to inshallah think about the honesty of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And another example of how he advised the children is once Al-Hussein. In one narration, Al-Hasan or Hussein, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But they were playing in the treasure house where every all the zakah and the sadaqah were collected, and they were playing there. And then Al-Hussein took one of the dates up and he was about to eat it. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ rushed all the way across the room, gently tapped on the hand or the finger of Al-Hussein, and he says, Kikh, yak. We are the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's family and we are not to touch the sadaqah. This is a trust given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't touch the sadaqah. Unfortunately, let me finish off with this. Many institutions, many masajid, many things, many projects are launched within the Islamic world with the intention of generating profit, and no attention is given at all to the people who are now. But the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was so careful about his message and da'wah that he was not willing to make any money or profit off of it, that he refused his family and he made it impermissible, unlawful for his own family to eat from the sadaqah. Even when his own family would go hungry, they would not be allowed to eat anything or touch anything from the sadaqah. La zakata li Qurayshi, in one of the narrations. No zakat is allowed for any of the Quraysh. Till this day, if you're from Quraysh or if you register as a Sharif, you're not allowed to take anything from the zakat or the sadaqah. And this goes to show you that the message of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not intended to generate income. It was not intended to be this movement or to take away any of that. No, it was a sincere message, revolution in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have only been sent, or I have been sent to perfect and complete the most complete of manners. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when Aisha was asked about his character, she said he was a walking Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I finish off again by reminding you of the verse, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. So if you're struggling with your children, it's time to brush up and read about the way that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was. And if you think that the way he treated children cannot make a change or cannot impact their lives, then you're wrong, and read about the important luminaries that revolutionized this deen and see how they were all influenced by one word that the Prophet Muhammad said. And so coming back to the way we started this khutbah or this halaqah, we're all asking and wondering, how do we raise a generation that's able to overcome all these struggles in the Middle East and all these bloody, violent encounters? It begins with our children. And if we fail with our children, they're going to grow up and we're going to set them up for failure with their own children. We got to stop the cycle somewhere, and we got to revive the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, because if there's one thing we learn from this, is that we are so far off from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. He told, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is told, tell them, if you love Allah, then follow Rasulullah, Allah will love you. And if you want to follow Rasulullah, you got to know who Rasulullah was. So read the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. إِلَى لِقَاءٍ آخَرٍ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us, forgive us any shortcomings. Any mistakes are of me and shaitan. It's out of Ramadan now, so we can say it's of me and shaitan. And any positive comments, any things that you've learned are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a great gift. Let us make dua for the people of Egypt and their struggles. Allahumma ansur ikhwanana fi Misr. اللهم انصر اخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم اغفر لشهدائنا وارحم موتانا. اللهم تقبل شهدائنا. اللهم تقبل شهدائنا. اللهم تقبل شهدائنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم اهد اخواننا وشبابنا ونسائنا ورجالنا في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم اهدهم يا رب العالمين. اللهم ثبتهم على الحق يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر اخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان. اللهم تقبل شهدائهم. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم وعافهم واعف عنهم ووسع مدخلهم ونقهم من الذنوب والخطايا كما ينقى الثوب الابيض من الدنس. وارحمنا اللهم برحمتك الواسعه اذا صرنا الى ما صاروا اليه تحت الجنادل والتراب والبنان. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Jazakallahu khairan. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.